I want to welcome you all and thank you for spending some time with us this afternoon. I will, yes, Raphael introduced me, so I want to shine a light right now on our two guests. We have Michael Bach, who is so well known in the inclusivity, diversity, inclusion, accessibility space. He's been the creator of the Center. Um, for, oh gosh, I'm getting the name wrong. The Canadian Center for Diversity Inclusion, CCDI, and Pride at Work in Canada. He's written several books. He's named as one of the 10 most influential DE&I leaders, revamping the future by CIO Views magazine. You want to check out Michael Bach and all of his work and stay tuned for his wisdom today. And as well, Julie Newman. Julie and I connected on the Disrupt HR stage last year, and her talk really stood out to me. She's an HR consultant and really is someone who really thinks practically about inclusion. Her company is called Willow Hall HR, and stay tuned for some gems from Julie as well. So, why are we talking today? Why am I having a talk around speaking up for what you need, part two? I am witnessing the struggle daily around really people feeling A, that they know what they need, and B, that they feel comfortable enough to speak up and ask for it. I'm also noticing organizations aren't sure how to have the conversations and sometimes would prefer you don't ask for what you need, or sometimes they're ready. And we've got forward thinking leaders and HR staff and accessibility departments, ERGs that are fostering great communication. But the challenge is very real. So I want to kick off the conversation today by looking at, what are we noticing with the environment that we're in and the challenges around speaking up? And I want to throw this over first to Michael, to maybe you can let us know what you're noticing in the space right now today.
Yeah, thanks, Claire, and thank you for having me. This is my first fishbowl. You are taking my fishbowl cherry. I don't think that sounds good. Um, you know, I shifted from using the initialism DEI to using idea
Mhm.
about 2 years ago or so, and I did that quite deliberately because I wanted. Um, to ensure that accessibility and access were
Mhm.
front and center in this conversation. As a person myself, I live with three disabilities. This has been the forgotten conversation. It's always the one that kind of falls off the table. We are seeing large numbers of people who are starting to require forms of accessibility, particularly around mental health, and employers unable or unprepared to meet those demands. And we also are seeing an interesting trend, I guess, if you will, that people do not identify with the term disability.
Mm.
And I'll give you an example. I worked with a client recently where we conducted a survey, a demographic survey. And what we found was that 40.8% of their respondents identified as living with a particular medical condition, but we didn't ask them if they lived with a disability.
Mhm.
So we just listed out three lists rather of different conditions, and
Mhm.
40.8% responded. And flip side, we asked for people to participate in a focus group for people with disabilities, and we got 6 people. It should have been somewhere in
Wow.
the hundreds. So the term disability is one that people just don't resonate with for a variety of reasons, and I don't blame
Mhm.
them for it. I mean, I think it's a horrible term, but we're seeing this trend where people are living with this condition, but they don't like the term.
Yeah, I love that you raise that. I'm going to come to you, Julie, in a second for your comments, but I do want to just say personally that what you just said resonates with me as someone with invisible challenges, barriers that are out there in the workplace. I like to focus on the barriers and opening the mind to thinking about proactive accessibility rather than accommodation. And if we anchor in disability, I know from reading a lot of comments, there are people that are proud to say, I have a disability and I need you to respect it. But I think that is in the minority. I know
Mhm.
for myself with MS, which I'm open about now, I couldn't talk about it for 7 years.
Right.
Right. And sometimes it's very much a disability, and other times I'd prefer to forget it. Thank you very much. So I love that you raised that point. And I think the language that we use needs to move away from this medical model to a social model. And we really need to be talking about accessibility. So thank you for that point, Michael, and your focus on idea. I love it. Julie, what would you like to say about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think first to jump in, and Michael, I love what you've shared about the need to shift from the terminology of disability. Like, I could not agree more. And I actually teach as well at the college level, and that still the term disability management, it's just I'm teaching it, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, we need to shift our language, because it's just we need to update our language for sure. And I think that will help and make people feel more comfortable having the conversations, because all of us, like, or many of us, have challenges, but wouldn't necessarily identify as saying that we have a disability. So I love that point. And I think, Claire, you'd asked sort of what are the challenges. I'm more on the workplace side and the employer side. I work with small, medium sized employers, but the trends that I'm seeing, mental health in the workplace, increased employees coming forward with concerns about mental health, pushing for their employer to do more and support them more in the mental health space for sure. And as a trend too, more folks going on leaves and coming back from leaves. So on the return to work side, especially generalists, or folks that practice as HR generalists, that side of our work is increasing at quite a rapid pace, and is just another piece that HR professionals are having to juggle.
Yeah, I think you're speaking what I'm noticing now. I've taken on a role with the Hidden Disability Sunflower Program, which has disabilities right in there. But refer to it in many different ways. But I've been noticing there is a sense that people are expecting to be considered, whether it's as a consumer or an employee or a volunteer, whatever capacity you're participating in life, you're expecting to be considered for who you are and how you're able to show up. And I think that's really where we need to go. And we just, Raphael and I were in a meeting this morning. Oh my gosh, Elliot's tail is now in my face. Just for people listening, I've got two cats, and when I'm talking, they seem to want to come and bomb the situation. So I call them, they make cat meows, not cameos, but cat meows. And so I've got Ellie is right here with us.
I'm glad you
So
clarified that Ellie is a cat.
yes, yes, Ellie is a
For
cat.
those
It's Ellie and
for those who
Theo.
can't see,
And I'm, yes, totally being loved up by my cat, probably in the hopes that I will provide some food at some point. But coming back to our conversation, um, Raphael and I were in a meeting this morning. We're going over the latest podcast episode. And in the conversation, we were talking about the fact that accessibility is everyone's problem. This is the episode coming out with Dr. Loran Starr shortly. And the point that she makes is that ultimately we need to get to a place where we're looking at each other with compassion so that we take care of everyone. Everybody has challenges of different kinds. You don't need to have a medical disability to require consideration and care. So, what I like about the sunflower program is there's a symbol to say, "Hey, could we take a beat, and could you see me, and let's notice." Oh my gosh, this cat's now on my keyboard. Okay, I might need to I may need to encourage them to be elsewhere at times. We need to have the conversations that say, what do you need to succeed? What do you need to contribute here? Not only in interactions in person, but audio interactions like this. I had customer service experiences last week, two of them horrific, one with a bank and one with an insurance company around a pharmaceutical company. And the one with the bank, it was talking about, there's a lot of, we're dealing with a lot of bureaucracy to keep us safe. And after confirming my name and that I knew the call was going to be recorded for, customer service purposes, blah, blah, it was, I need to read you now this consent, and it's going to take 5 to 8 minutes. And I said, hell to the no. I'm not an auditory processor. I hope you all are. You're in the audio show with us right now. But if you're not, then I said, no, I would really prefer you send me that document and I'll review it at my leisure. I would have tuned out to somebody reading me something that is not particularly riveting. And I wouldn't have been able to cope. And so that was the bank and the insurance company. Get this. Okay, we're going to validate your experience, and we want to know how old are you? Is your age? Pick from one of the following: A, 55 to 56, B, 56 to 57, C, 58 to 59. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm 56. What are you doing? Cognitive overwhelm. So, what we need is this concept of what do you need to succeed? And is there anything you'd like me to know about you to help you in this situation? Boom, that question would have been, yeah, ask me a question. I'll do my best to answer it. That's how we're going to roll. And because I disclosed that I'm autistic, I now say, I require a lot of information. I'm going to ask you all the questions, and I may be a two-tad for you direct. So I apologize in advance, but please bear with me. And this is kind of how my brain works. So this is me stepping into self-awareness and asking for what I need, which I think everyone has a need, whether there's a condition underlying it or not. So I want to just acknowledge the folks that are in the room. I see Shalini and Andre, Lee and Kelly, Latoya, Tyler. I want you to all know that you are very much part of this conversation. And I'd love you to be raising your hand to join us up on stage. Or if you feel like asking a question anonymously, then you DM Rafael Donna. You send a direct message to him. And what this does is means I don't look at the DM and disclose your name by accident because I'm not really good at multitasking. I'm like, hello, Tara. I mean, oh, not Tara. So this protects you from me by accident disclosing who you are, and you're welcome to ask questions. We've got Michael Bach here, who's an idea advocate, inclusivity, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and Julie Newman, an HR consultant who's living it in the real world with small and medium business organizations every day. So thank you for that talk about, what are we noticing in terms of the conversation and the language we need to use. I want to get a little bit into how are we making it? I'm sorry, my cat's on my other mouse. Okay, wait a second. What I want to do is talk about, the fact we're not required to disclose any condition. We're not required to talk about our own particular needs from any medical angle. We're really invited to say what we need and ask for this. How are employers responding to an employee without this diagnosis? In most cases, I'm hearing they get a doctor's note. The doctor's note doesn't have enough information. The questions feel invasive. How do we invite a shift? And I'll throw this to you, Michael, first, and I'll come back to you, Julie, on this. But how do we get to this place where we're not afraid to have this conversation, given that we have accessibility legislation, which says now a company is required to take care of a person in this capacity?
Well, there's a lot there.
Mm.
So first off, I think we need to normalize the request for alternative means. And I don't use the term accommodation, largely because everything is an accommodation. I'll ask you all a question, and certainly the listeners think about this. Did you bring your chair to work today? If you did not, the chair you are sitting on is a form of accommodation. A person who is a wheelchair user brought their own chair. What's your problem? I worked with a woman many years ago who was fully blind. And it's a long story. We worked in a very old building. I brought her to her desk, and the first thing I did was to apologize for the lighting. And she looked in my general direction and said, "You idiot, the lights are for you. If they go out, I can keep working. What's your problem?" And it was that moment that I thought, oh my gosh, absolutely. Lights are an accommodation for people who are sighted. So I think we need to normalize that everyone has different needs.
Mhm.
And we need to treat people how they need to be treated, not through some formulaic process of we're going to treat everyone the same because that's fair. And I put that in air quotes. Um, I think employers need to
I think
and
I'm losing Michael's audio a little bit there.
very much.
You know what?
Uh,
Oh, there, you're back, Michael. You're back.
oh,
Yep,
oh,
you're back. That's okay.
okay, I'm back. All right, sorry about that. Um, I think the onus should be on employers. If you want to get the most out of your people, if you want them to be the most productive, then you need to, as an employer, you need to take responsibility for making sure they have what they need to do their job. I think the whole doctor's note is just nonsense. It's a bit insulting to people who live with these sorts of medical conditions that I have to go get somebody else to write a note to say that I have it. Would we ever ask for a doctor's note for somebody who's pregnant? No, we would not. We would, accept that if a person comes in and says, I'm pregnant, that they are pregnant. And that is how it works. Um, I think it is we should simply start to normalize this process where someone comes in and says, I need X. And the employer's response is, okay, let's figure that out. Full stop.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Julie, in light of that, how prepared do you think our organizations are to have this kind of conversation? What can they do to recognize legislation that and fears of expense, and what else is at play in an organizer's mind?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the first, are employers ready? And I think the answer is no. Definitely not. They're not ready for the conversation, and prepared for it. And I think, from the insights both of you shared, I think if you think about the long term and what does this look like in the longer term, I think it's more around creating accessible workplaces for all. And so the idea that no one needs to come and ask for an accommodation or ask for something, that there's the options available to everyone, that, they can pick and choose without having to go through the process. So, being the eternal optimist, I think that that's possible in the future. But at the moment, I'd say, employers are not there, and so we are living in the situation where, the doctor's notes are coming in, and I'll say on the flip side, is on the employer side, I hate the doctor's notes. I hate having them come in. They they usually are inefficient. They don't tell me anything that's helpful, and I usually have to send someone back to the doctor to get, or their healthcare professional, to get information that I need to actually, create an accommodation plan with the person that is going to be helpful. So, if you're trying to navigate that world right now and you have a great employer, I think having the conversation first, is a really great idea. And just kind of saying, hey, like, you may have noticed that, I have some challenges with this, or, I struggle with this, you know, um, what do you think might be done, or what do you think we might be able to do, and start there, because sometimes you don't even need to go to the doctor to get a note, and it's an easy accommodation, or easy, adjustment to the work, or there's flexibility there that you didn't even realize in the workplace. But I always like being brought into the conversation early, because even if I am going to send you to get medical information, then I can send you with a job description and with sort of some of the pieces that I need to be able to work on the back end and figure out, what are the types of things that we can do internally. And, these conversations, it's not, they're meant to be a partnership between the employee and the employer. And that, the employer or HR typically understands the nature of the work and the job, and the employee is an expert in themselves, and then their healthcare practitioner is an expert in, with the employee in their condition. And so, it's not meant to be the employer, dictating what the accommodation is. It's really supposed to be a conversation. And I think that there's opportunity to lead that back to the conversation versus, this, presenting a medical note just right
Mhm.
away.
Mhm. Thank you for that. I want to come back to what you were talking us through there. And you said that if somebody gave you a note, you would have to send them back to the doctor for more. Is there a reason that you feel the need to go back to the doctor for more rather than being able to
Yeah.
go just to conversation with that person directly now that the conversation has been started?
Yeah. And you know what? Like I would say, Claire, like, my practice is absolutely, I have a conversation with the person before just sending them randomly back to the doctor. So
Hmm.
absolutely, I'd have a conversation. But typically when I have to send someone back, it's because I get a note, where, the doctor will tell me the exact accommodation that's needed versus what someone's abilities are. And so, sometimes that accommodation that the doctor says, that can be one way that someone can meet their needs, but it doesn't always work, for the employer necessarily. There may be challenges with that, and that may be the solution, but there may be
So it's a
others.
prescription. You're getting right to the prescription rather than honing
Yeah.
in on what the challenges.
Right. And
Yeah.
so it's not, it's like the doctor telling you how to do the job when, what, there's actually more to the conversation on both
Yeah.
sides of the equation, I
Yeah.
think. And
Yeah.
so it's typically when someone goes back.
Yeah. I want to ask, maybe this is a bit personal, but I think it's on the minds of many now with Amazon, Ubisoft, federal government in Canada ordering people back to the office 3 to 5 days a week and the commute. So, my particular situation back in 2007, 2008 was working for a company, and I did the analysis of my job from a task perspective. 90% of my job was on the phone. And I had two young kids, age 3 and age 5. And the commute then was about an hour each way. The daycare, of course, was in the other direction. So it was for me, as someone who didn't know anything about autism at that point, high sensory sensitivity, overwhelmed, didn't even know about the highly sensitive person and that temperament type. Didn't know why, but I was just not, I was struggling. And when I did the analysis and 90% of the job was on the phone, I pitched 50% to come into the office 50% of the time and anytime you need me for a meeting, and was flatly denied. So um, sometimes it's not the task. Sometimes it's not the adjustment in the workplace. It's about flexibility. How do we make those arguments for flexibility? What could you say to someone here? And I'll come to Julie and then I'll come back to Michael. And listeners, if this is you and you have a question that you'd like to put to these two people who well understand the conversation and perhaps different ways of looking at it, please raise your hand. And Raphael, after Julie comments, I'm going to come and see if we've got any questions. All
Okay,
right.
great.
Yeah, so I mean, flexibility. I mean, I think from an employer standpoint, um, I know many are requiring people to come back to the office. I do think this is short-sighted on their part. I think it's very short-sighted. The reality is, there's a skill shortage. We need really talented folks in organizations, and good organizations are making shifts and flexibility, along with that. Um, so again, if you're an employer listening and you're not thinking about that, I think it's past time to be thinking about how you can get the best people to join your organization and stay with your organization, and flexibility being one of those. If you are advocating for it, I think, understanding the reasons why. Sometimes organizations do have good reasons for why you need to be in the office, um, and other times they don't, unfortunately. I think when I looked at one of the articles for Amazon, I think the reason was around the need for creating employee culture or corporate culture. And,
Mhm.
like, I think there's great ways to create amazing corporate culture in remote workplaces. It takes more effort and more intentionality, but it is entirely doable.
Yeah,
And, maybe, you know, um, I think sharing some of that information to employers too, and sharing some success stories can
yeah,
be helpful. Um, and also, like, share on your employee engagement surveys, your feedback forms, your anonymous feedback, or non-anonymous feedback to your manager too, as well. And I think help them understand how that means that you can be more productive at work.
yeah. Well, I think the whole accessibility, inclusivity piece is missing from these conversation and these mandates, because let's go back to the way it was and build our culture. Well, that culture was full of microaggressions and exclusion and discomfort and sensory overwhelm. It did not fit everyone. So I think there's such leadership blindness at play here. And my mission is to try and invite more leaders to reflect on things they haven't really considered. Never mind the benefit to the planet of people not rushing around quite so far every day. So there are a lot of reasons we need to think about that inclusivity. Um, thank you for that, Julie. Raphael, do we have any questions in the wings? And then I'll come over to you, Michael.
Yes, we do have an anonymous question,
Thank
and
you.
this person asks, how would you suggest to educate people about neurodivergence without over disclosing? This person also says that they've had colleagues explain what they need and why, and leaders usually respond, "That won't work for us," because they unfortunately perceive challenges being discussed as irresponsibility or lack of professionalism.
Mm, yeah.
Mhm.
It's there's a lot of learning to be done, even in my own learning. Can I just say that I identified as a highly sensitive person, was trying to elbow my way into the conversation around neurodivergence for many, many years. Finally, through listening to the Happy Space podcast, where we've talked a lot about neurodivergence, and it was my interview with Melanie Diesel, I think it's episode 46, if I'm not wrong, where I was curious about autism and understanding it better. And when Melanie talked about her own lived experience, and light bulb after light bulb after light bulb went off for me, that's when I dug in a bit deeper. So I do get the sense there's more interest from organizations, but I think there's a learning opportunity here. And Michael, I want to throw it back over to you now to maybe pick up this question for our listener, but also weigh in on the question we had before.
Yeah, so I think the answer to the listener's question is assume that you have people who are neurodivergent. As employers, just assume that you have people who are neurodivergent. And so as a result, you educate people on what that means. What does that look like? How do you manage people who are neurodivergent? What are some of the things that you can do in order to make a more inclusive environment? Just assume that everyone is neurodivergent, and therefore you will treat people, the people who need that accommodation, pardon the expression, will get what they need. If you sit back and wait for someone to put up their hand, then you are always going to be in reactive mode. And I think it is imperative that you take on a proactive position. It's the same around any form of accommodation. Just take on a proactive position. So if you're designing a new office space, and I will put a big asterisk by this one because I too am somebody who doesn't feel the need to go into the office. I also am self-employed now, so that's another thing. But if you're designing a new office, then make sure that it is fully accessible, that it has, if it has multiple floors, there's absolutely going to be a lift or a elevator. Make sure that you have wide hallways. Make sure that you address the lighting. Lighting is something that people who are neurodivergent can be incredibly sensitive to. So just make sure that the default is accommodation, and then you don't have to accommodate anyone because everyone is being taken into consideration. To come back to the other question, I don't think we should be asking for doctor's notes because it's nobody's damn business. I just don't think that should be the default. I think to what Julie said, doctors are the experts and they will start to then be experts whether they understand the job that the person does at all. And I think it should be enough that an individual comes in and says, listen, I know my job and I know myself. I know what I need in order to be successful. The vast majority of people who live with some sort of condition, they know what they need. To your point, Claire, working from home may be what you need. And that will allow you to be the most successful. And employers should stop treating everyone the same. It's the equitable approach. What do you need to be successful? Asking those questions and making sure that we're addressing people how they will work best.
Yeah, exactly. You said a couple of things which tweaked my mind immediately. So number one is I've worked as a productivity coach for maybe it's over 15 years now with organization and productivity and helping people. And I will tell you that everything I did to help someone with executive function challenge helps almost everyone. So,
Exactly.
right? It's like more structure, better clarity, chunking a big piece of text into smaller pieces, formatting. And I figured this out pretty early on, probably to serve myself, because I have a lovely side order of ADHD to go along with the autism, which I didn't know either. I thought this was totally from the other line in my family. But, so it's been really interesting because I've been naturally curious to figure out things that help make my journey smoother. Once you know what those things are, yes, you can ask for them. I think it's one thing to recognize in this is it's not static. It's quite a dynamic journey, and you will always be discovering. And I do think this is a great time. I just want to share the ask model, which is something I've come up with as a way of inviting people to stay in curiosity. So ask came from this question, and we've all been talking about, which is what do you need to succeed? What do you need to be performing at your best? So if you think, gosh, I've got to ask, I want to break down ask into three components. And if you're an employer listening in particular, I want you to hold on to this mindset. A is for anticipate. So this is that proactive anticipation. What might my employees need? And like Michael said, assume you have neurodivergent employees. We're at least 1 in 5, if not more. So you have to think we process differently, whether it's autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyscalculia, whether it's traumatic brain injury, whether it's stroke, whether it's Parkinson's, whether it's whatever it is, we've got challenges that affect and invite us to think and process differently, and we need to make room for that. So understand that we need to anticipate for who's in the room. The S is support. So that's suggest and source solutions. What do you already know that's going to be helpful to someone? Like go there. We've got helplines. We've got EAP programs. Here's the thing that came up on my interview with Dr. Loran Starr, which will drop next week. Uh, Blue paper. For someone with dyslexia, this enabled her to read when everything she'd come across before was on white paper and she could not read. So something as simple as blue paper. So anticipate, support, and then the K is commit to better knowing each person. So every time you provide support, it's an experiment. Did it work? Did it not work? How's it going? Is it working for you? Do we need to try something else? The same applies with ourselves. We need to anticipate, support, and know ourselves. The more we know, the better we can anticipate. And this is beautiful cyclical loop. And I invite you to stay in curiosity. If you want to hear a TED talk on that, coming up November 23rd in Waterloo. So I'm really excited. And this actually, Julie, you might remember it was the closing part of my slides in the Disrupt HR conference. So I couldn't resist sharing that now because it's a big important message to invite leaders to stay. I do want to say, I think I noticed a hand up from, I think it was Glennis, and I saw the hand go down. So I apologize if we've lost Glennis, but if you do have a question, we are open to take your questions. I'm sorry we missed Glennis's question. And before I jump to another point, Raphael, are there any other questions in the wings for us?
We don't have any anonymous questions yet.
Okay, thank you so much. So this conversation, I've already suggested this is dynamic. We're understanding ourselves better over time. We're understanding our teams better over time. I want to think really specifically about this conversation. Is there anything in the conditions within which we have this conversation that helps set it up to be something we can better relax into, feel trusted, feel trusting, feel like we can enter into these? How do organizations and how do we ourselves start to create the safety in that space to be able to have a conversation where we may be feeling vulnerable and we're not sure what the response is going to be? Can I put this to Julie first and then I'll come back to Michael?
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, I think there's a couple pieces there I could pick up on. As an employer, I think you mentioned the importance of psychological safety, and I 100% agree. And for employers listening out there, I don't know if you've seen Canada's psychological health and safety standards for the workplace, but they are free, and there's great resources to learn how to implement those and see how you're doing in your workplace. So, if you're on the employer side and you're looking to support your employees in this work, that's a great place to start. And then in terms of, having the conversations, I think about where you are the most comfortable. What is going to set you up for success to have those conversations? Time, place, is that a virtual conversation? Is that in person? Is that, what time of day? When are you most functional and the most sort of confident, or what's going to work best for you? But then I think also think about who you're having the conversation with, and do a little bit of prep as well on, like, you probably don't want to have that conversation with the person that just came out of a 3 hour long meeting and is rushing to another meeting. You want them to be in a space where they are able to give you your full attention. So I think, thinking about, someone's day, when is a nice time for them to have the conversations, talking to them ahead. Maybe, what, I'd really like to have a conversation with you. When is a good time to do that too? And trying to set something up. And I mean, even thinking about, that might be saying, hey, can we go and get coffee instead of going into the office or into their office? It might be, hey, can you come and meet with me, in a neutral space? I think there's lots of options. And even one-to-ones are held in different places depending on the organization and what the content is. So I think there's lots of opportunities to think about what is going to support you, but also, like, you
Yeah.
want to think about what how you're setting the person that you're having the conversation up for success and to have their full attention as well.
Yeah. You're giving me flashbacks now, Julie, to when I had a sexual harassment complaint that I raised when I was 23. And I remember going to the director of HR and her meeting with me with her arms folded. It didn't feel like a very safe conversation at all. And then I remember very much so feeling that I wanted to have follow-up conversations elsewhere because I didn't
Yeah.
want people noticing that I was going to the HR space. So, and I'm sorry, you might have seen on my face because for audio listeners, we're meeting in a Zoom room right now as well. So we can see each other while we're talking, which is a bit of a privilege for us, and it helps my brain a lot. But I was almost laughing, and you could see when you said go, from a 3 hour meeting and rushing to the next one. I think you're nailing the fact that we're not making time. I don't think for the connection that's required to really see each other with compassion and to slow down and to make time. I think this whole move towards compassion, to see each other and to invite the best of each other, requires a patience that is really hard to come by in a hustle culture. So I just wanted to hear what you were saying and think I can see people's eyes going, yeah, that's not happening in my day. So the struggle is real. Um, yeah. Yeah. Anything further you wanted to add to that, or I'll come to Michael next.
And I think one of the things when, like, and I hear that, and I hear that all the time, like, we don't have the time for the conversation. And I think
Yeah.
it's also okay to say, like, ahead of time, I want to have a conversation with you. It's really important to me. I really want to make sure that I have your attention. When would be a great time to have that? Or when could we
Mhm.
set some time for that? And
Mhm.
then you've kind of laid the context of, what, this is important to me as a person.
Mhm.
And, I understand that you're busy and it's still important to me, but, you're asking for that ahead. And I think, when you give leaders the heads up that this is important to you, a lot of them will, go, okay, like, Julie doesn't ask for much from me very often. You know what? This is important to her and I'll make the time for it.
Mhm. Asking for the time to ask. I like it.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Michael, any thoughts on this and this, the patience that's required for this work?
Yeah, the thing that's coming to mind is, or the first thing that's coming to mind is, it is uh, the onus should be on the employer to create the space where someone should feel comfortable raising these issues. These are very personal things.
Mhm.
And if I don't have to raise that I live with a particular medical condition because it's not going to impact my work, then I'm not going to,
Mhm.
because frankly, it's none of the employer's business. But the employer can create that culture where it's okay to talk about neurodivergence or different needs as an employee. And why I keep coming, putting it back on the feet of the employers, laying it back on the feet of the employers. And I don't do that because I'm, you know, have a particular leaning either way. But employers are saying, oh, we need you to be engaged. We need you to be productive. Okay, well, create the space where I can be.
Mhm.
And as opposed to, you need to adapt to our space.
Mhm.
So the employer can create the space that says, you can bring any issue to me. If you book a meeting with me, I am going to turn off my email. I am going to close the door. I am going to have a private conversation with you that is focused on you. I'm going to practice active listening, as opposed to, well, can't this just be done in an email?
Mm.
No, it cannot. I'm going to tell you about my deep, medical conditions, about my depression, about my ADHD. So no, I cannot do that in an email. I want to have a personal conversation. And this is where empathy comes into the conversation. And I am on the empathy bandwagon. We need to have leaders that are more empathetic and who are recognizing that people are human beings and they need to engage in conversations in a very personal level. Claire, I just noticed that Tra has their hand up, so I'm excited to have someone engage here.
Thank you so much, Tra. Welcome to the conversation. They should be able to join us. I've given, let's see, invite a speaker. Here we go. Here we go. Tra's been sent an invitation. If they accept, they will be here momentarily. And I'm also curious of what the question is.
This
Okay,
is my ADHD active at work, because all of a sudden I heard something in my ear and went, oh, what's that?
yeah, I've sent 2 invitations. Raphael, maybe I'll ask you if you can invite as a speaker as well, because I've done that, but I haven't got an okay. So I think the ball's in Tra's court, assuming that technology is working as it is intended to. But I
Oh,
I,
that's
I love
big
that
assumption.
you're, yeah, you never quite know. Well, and I think, it's the pandemic put every leader in that position of anticipating. What did I read in? Okay, I read through the communication from Amazon to the employees, from their leader, talking about, we want you in the office 5 days a week. Extenuating circumstances. Do we have a list anywhere of what's an extenuating circumstance? Does the fire in Jasper and Maui last year, do those count as extenuating service situations? How about a plumbing leak in your own house? How about immune compromisation of a partner? How about a child's is at university and their whole house flooded because the sewer backed up? Ask me how I know. Right, so there's like, what's an extenuating circumstance, and are we giving an example to that? Because we better be prepared as organizations at the drop of a hat to be able to work remotely and accommodate, adjust, find alternative means, to use your beautiful language, Michael. I think we have learned the hard way that we need to be able to go to these different ways of thinking, and that should be our go-to. So this is why I talk about total teamwork. It's a program that I've put in place, and I'd love your thoughts on whether you think this is something that organizations might do. And if you're listening out there, tell me what you think. So total teamwork is a program where I get a leader and their immediate team in a room, and we go through a questionnaire that has everybody articulate what they need to do their best work. Because I'll tell you, I gave a talk to a whole bunch of entrepreneurs, and on the questionnaire, it took about 15 minutes to do. People were like, I've never thought about this before. So sometimes we know what we need. Sometimes we haven't had the lens to even say what sets me up to do well. I know this from coaching people. We self sabotage and don't design for our well being. So we do that questionnaire. Then we introduce each other. We have one-on-one conversations. So I would get to know Michael, and I would get to understand what sets Michael up to do his best work. And I would come to the room with Julie and I'd say, hey, this is Michael. Michael does his best when. And so we're moving from empathy right into compassion in that moment. We also look at our key tasks and figure out that which is critical to be done together and why. And then we move into a design phase with this understanding, this empathy and understanding of who each other is. We then say, okay, when do we need to come together? And oh, you're a morning person and you can't do 8 a.m. because you're doing kid drop off? Fabulous. Let's miss the commute. Let's make this 10 till 2, and we're going to have a lunch brought in. And, we're going to think about connection. We're going to think about task. We're going to take care of the business without mistreating the people. And I think therein lies the opportunity. So I'm curious, listeners, oh gosh, we have Marielle, we have Rachel, Sonia, Craig, Stephen. I'm going to try and say a name. Kaja, tell me if I'm saying it wrong. Rodrigue, Glenda, Clare is still here. Gemma, if you've got a comment or an opportunity or a question here for Julie or Michael or myself, please either send Rafael Donna a message, or please feel free to raise your hand. I'm going to be bold here, and I'm going to be quiet for a few seconds so you have time to think of a question and raise your hand. In my coach training, we were taught to ask ourselves, why am I talking? Acronym is WAIT. So, and this uncomfortable silence can give people the time to think. You might need that time. You might need that time in that conversation that you're going to have with your employer. Ask for it. Ask for what you need to process and make your best decision. Don't feel pressured. Don't feel rushed. Ask to come back with a response if you need time. Julie's brilliant suggestion in her Disrupt HR presentation last year was, gosh, if we're going to interview people, why don't we publish the interview questions in advance so people aren't feeling like they have to be playing improv and giving their best performative answer in that moment? Why don't we allow thought and reflection? I just gave an interview this afternoon on CBC radio in Montreal. We had a pre-interview, a 5-minute discussion beforehand to just go through what the questions would be and what might I like to talk about. So I was prepared for the interview. Now, I did 15 of these a couple of weeks ago, so I was really prepared, but it was still wonderful to have this ability to talk about what we were going to do. And that's the big invitation, is to think about how you process, how you work as a human animal, how you think from a biology perspective, from a psychology perspective, all of these different things, really, really important to hold on to and anchor in, and then find your voice to ask for what's going to set you up for success. We've got a few minutes left. We've got 7 minutes left. So if anybody has a question, oh, I see a direct message. I'm not good at direct messages, but I'm not good at direct messages. If it's something that I need to see, I'm going to ask you to send it to Raphael, because not only, okay, I have you can't see this, listeners, but I have my alternative means of viewing glasses on, which are absolutely an accommodation and adjustment. And still, I can't read that really tiny font. So um, if you have a question, please send it to Raphael and he will read it for you. I want to invite now both Michael and Julie. I'm going to throw it to Michael first. I'd love for you to let listeners know where they can find your body of work, mention your books, and what you would like people to know about you and where to possibly connect with you now.
Julie, do you want to start?
Sure, if you'd like me to. So you can reach me at willowhallhr@gmail.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. Feel free to look me up on LinkedIn. Love to connect with folks in the field. Or you can check out my website, willowhallhr.com.
willowhallhr.com. I always like saying things super slow when somebody's trying to remember it. willowhallhr.com. And it's Julie Newman. You can see her name on the screen. And if you're not seeing it, it's Julie, Julie, Newman, Newman. All right. Thank you very much, Julie. Definitely look her up. Wonderful ideas and lots of HR support to be found there. And Michael, I'm going to come to you now. What would you like to let listeners know?
Yeah, so first of all, 2 books. My publisher would be remiss if I did not share the titles. Birds of All Feathers, Doing Diversity and Inclusion Right, and Alphabet Soup, The Essential Guide to LGBTQ2 plus Inclusion at Work. You can find them wherever they sell books, as long as they are selling mine. You can also go to my website at michaelbach.com. That's Michael, B like boy, ACH, the composer or the lead singer of Skid Row, depending on your age. Catherine Bach from the Dukes of Hazzard. I'm saying this because the number of ways my name is spelt is just astounding to me. And I'm also on all of the social media platforms. I am the Michael Bach, wherever you doom scroll like I do.
Oh, it's a thing. It's a thing right now.
It's a
Thank you
thing.
for that very much, Michael. I usually tell people my name is Clare with no third I. So Clare,
Oh,
and Kumar as
right.
in Harold and. So, and
Very
then
good.
people know it. Well, I want to thank everyone. It's the top of the hour. I want to thank everyone for coming. Thank you to my guests. Thank you to Julie Newman. Thank you to Michael Bach. I'll go with the composer version of Bach because that just makes me happy. And thank you to Raphael for being here and helping us along as well. I want to invite you again, sign up for Happy Space Hot Topics. We're going to stay in this Zoom room right now. And if you were on the Happy Space Hot Topics list, you'd have the invite and you'd be able to join Julie and Michael and myself in person. So thanks very much. We're going to end this call now. And I wish you all well and hope to see you and hear you again. Thank you.